Hi everyone, welcome to the latest Bison video blog along with Jeff Kolpack. I'm Dom Izzo. We're into the heart of the basketball season. We're also just a few days away from National Signing Day. A lot of busy and exciting times around North Dakota State. We're in the heart of the Summit League season, as I mentioned, Jeff. The Bison men are in the midst of a two-game losing streak, and finally the streak was snapped against South Dakota State in front of a huge crowd, the biggest crowd NDSU has had 3 years at the BSA. The Jacks finally got through NDSU, and now, as we start the second half of the conference season, NDSU at 6-3. Biggest issues going forward for the Bison as we start the second half?
First of all, Dom, I think it was a matter of time before that streak went, because South Dakota State is now good enough where NDSU probably shouldn't be winning this every game.
10 in a row.
Yeah, exactly. It's the 10 in a row, take it, enjoy it, and you'll probably never see it again for quite some time. As far as issues with NDSU, their half-court offense to me just doesn't seem to be rotating very well, and guys getting open. And the shots that were there earlier in the year against some of these teams, against UND and against South Dakota State, just weren't there. And now they were very good on the transition late in the game against South Dakota State. Taylor Brown really took the ball and took it right to the hole. He was fantastic. Ben Woodside-ish, as you said on the radio show on Monday. So the talent's there. They just got to figure out this half-court dynamic offense, and get it going earlier.
This is a tough weekend going to IPFW and Oakland. We can go on and on about the Golden Grizzlies, but these are two teams that the Bison swept here in Fargo. They're going to be prime for NDSU when they come this weekend.
Well, Oakland's going to be waiting for NDSU because Oakland got spanked like they've never got spanked.
And then lost at Brookings, too.
Exactly. So, they've been pointing to this weekend. IPFW, I think, is a must-win for NDSU. It's they're an okay team. They're in the middle of the pack. It's a beatable team. If NDSU plays well, they'll win, but they have to play well on the road.
Bracket Buster selection show comes out on Monday. We'll find out who NDSU will play. Right now, as we sit here, they have an RPI of 132. So it looks like they may play a team from the Missouri Valley, which Bison fans would love to see, or a MAC team come here. We've heard anything between Youngstown State, Indiana State, or Western Michigan. These will all be quality opponents that the Bison will play on February the 18th, and then we'll have to go there next season. It's a prime opportunity for the Bison.
Love to see a Missouri Valley team
I would too.
Come to Fargo just because it's a league we're familiar with because of the football programs. And, I'd like to see an Illinois State or somebody. That'd be fun.
On the women's side, the Bison are coming off a 36-point defeat to South Dakota State. Now 13 of 14 the Jacks have won over NDSU. And as you mentioned, you didn't think we were going to see that streak anymore on the men's side. For the women, it's continued, The point differential is getting wider for South Dakota State, Jeff. And I ask you this now because the Bison sit at 4-5. They're right now tied for 5th in the Summit League standings as we start the second half of the conference schedule. But what do they have to do to at least, bridge this gap? Because South Dakota State is making a pretty wide margin over the Bison right now.
I don't think it's rocket science. You got to get the players in that South Dakota State is getting. I think NDSU would love to have those second 5 players that South Dakota State threw out there. At some point, you got to start beating the Jacks for these recruiting battles. These girls are not from California or anywhere. They're from Minnesota, South Dakota, and in some cases pretty close in
Iowa.
So they need to figure out and beat South Dakota State on some of these recruiting battles. Now, it is what it is. I mean, these are large point spreads. All the people at the BSA, we saw what we saw, and they got to start somehow bridging that gap.
Here's the biggest stat in my mind. The last time the Bison beat South Dakota State was February of 2005. There were 6,000 people, 6,000 people at the BSA that night. And there was a good crowd on Friday night, about 1,300 if I remember right, an alumni weekend. But there was plenty of alumni that were sitting in the crowd, I'm sure, that were, folding their arms and not pleased with what they saw out of the performance on Friday.
Well, I can't speak for them, but I've talked to a few of them and remained friends, with several of the players. No, of course they're not happy. They put a lot into the program, a lot of those Division II titles, and when they made the Division I move, I think in their minds they thought women's basketball would be one. And that's what everybody thought.
And that's not been the case so far as they head into the second half of the conference schedule. Football is always 365 days a year. Craig Bohl tells me that all the time, and it's big news for the Bison football program. For the second time in its history, they'll have a player going to the NFL Combine, offensive tackle, All-American Paul Kornick got the call on Wednesday morning, Jeff, that he's going to Indianapolis after he's going to an All-Star game in Arkansas in early February. Great honor for a guy who really has developed over the last 4 years at NDSU.
And you and I just got done talking to him, and I think he's grown since the season. That guy just keeps getting bigger and bigger. He looks like he's 6'10 and huge. 350 and athletic. It's a great opportunity. The Combine, of course, is where the players do their best impressions in front of the pro scouts. And he's going to the formerly the Texas versus Nation All-Star game. Yep. It's now called the Players Championship or something. Sounds like a golf tournament.
It does.
But so he has a chance there to impress some NFL scouts. I think he has a good chance. He has the size. He's finally getting the notoriety I think that he deserves. And it's a matter of him. I don't know how he does on his numbers in his combine, so I'm interested to see how those come out.
We just go back to 2007. Craig Dahl was a no-name out of North Dakota State, goes and sets the best time in the 60-yard shuttle. Before you know it, he's got a free agent contract with the Giants, has a Super Bowl ring, and now has been a 2-year starter with the St. Louis Rams the last couple of years. Can show what you can do at the combine just out of that guy.
And even at the pro days at NDSU, they have the pro day once every March, every year. And like Joe Mays impressed people as a fullback.
Fullback, if I remember right.
During the tryout process.
Crazy.
But and those are where you really make the most headway with the scouts. Yep. You talk to them one-on-one. They look you in the eye, and in a lot of cases, we know after that tryout who's kind of looking where, because if they're not looking at you and they're not talking at you,
if they're not talking to you, if they're not talking to you after, that's the biggest key.
That's the biggest
thing. Scouts
thing.
are talking to you after. That's always a good sign on pro day. That's one guy that's leaving NDSU. NDSU got 4 that are going to be coming in on signing day on Wednesday from all over the area. Demetrius Gray out of Chicago, a wide receiver signed. Austin Farnloff and Chooks Amici out of Arizona. That's a defensive lineman and a linebacker from Arizona. And then Brett Pierce, a defensive tackle out of Holy Angels in Minnesota, a 6'6" guy. These are all more than likely, I'm just going to guess, that are probably going to redshirt for 2012, but all guys that are huge and could be impact players down the line here for North Dakota State. 2
defensive tackles there, and I think it fits the timeline because NDSU's starting defensive line is primarily going to be juniors next year. And those guys come in, they redshirt, those group will be seniors, and then it's just a natural progression. So I think there probably was an emphasis on getting some impact defensive players. And 2 of those players were in the Arizona top 25 team by one of the publications.
You also had a kicker added as well that you blogged about. And this is interesting to me because NDSU has a kicker on scholarship in Adam Keller who redshirted and then didn't play this season. Curious that they went and got another one with Ryan Jastrom out the door.
I think the coaching staff loves the competition. I think Adam Keller maybe made Ryan Jastrom a little better or vice versa. And now just having one guy, I think that there's something to be said for having, it's almost like an insurance policy here. Because if this guy doesn't do it, he's a redshirt. We don't know Adam Keller.
Nope.
We haven't seen him in a game. Maybe he's great, maybe he's Mr. Clutch, maybe he's not. But then if you don't, have another guy ready to rock.
This is up to 14 commitments now the Bison have had, and this is something you and I have talked about. We had Steve Hallstrom on to ask about it last week. Initial impressions, championship help or hurt, at least from the guys that you've seen that they've gotten verbal commitments from?
I think it hurt initially, but I think they made up some ground here in the last week.
The Pierce kid is really, really good. Had an offer from Wyoming, UND, USD, 6'6" guy that a lot of people had talked about. I know they were super high on Ben Lauer, the kid out of Wayzata who ended up going to Minnesota, but it looks like the majority of the guys they want, they have got so far with a week to go, and at least 4 or 5 more scholarships looking like to be available.
You know what's amazing is every kid everybody wanted, they all got.
Yeah.
It'll be incredible. By next Wednesday, everybody will got the exact same class that they wanted.
And coaches will say, "These are the guys.
Everybody.
We got everybody we wanted." That's always the mandated statement for any football coach on National Signing Day. So we got that to look forward to coming up next week. We got a big weekend of Bison basketball as NDSU heads out on the road for IPFW and Oklahoma. Full coverage of that and wrap it up next week. For Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. The latest edition of the Bison Video Blog.